Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I'd like to go for a moment into the question. In fact, Dr. Holtz-Eakin, I'm going to focus on you. I apologize to the others. It's primarily because I know you best, and I don't really have time in my 5 minutes to go through 5 witnesses. But I want to focus on the issue, really, the big pressure that we're seeing here in Congress is to raise taxes. One of the big issues that we're dealing with right now is because of the explosion in spending, the explosion in debt, and the fiscal circumstances that we face. The question is, what role does tax policy play in our response to that, and should we raise taxes? And the first thing I want to make clear, just as a statement, is we keep talking about the 2001 and 2003 Bush tax cuts. But the issue here is whether we are going to allow taxes to spring back, in other words, to go up. And I think a lot of the time in the discussion, we think that we're talking about a tax cut here. What we're really talking about is whether to extend current tax law and keep taxes where they are, or whether to have yet again another tax increase in response to our fiscal circumstances. And I understand generally, Dr. Holtz-Eakin, that you do not believe that an increase in taxes at this time is the proper response to our economic circumstances. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And I didn't intend to do this when I came in because I got a number of other questions about the 2001 and 2003 tax cuts, but there's so much being said about the fact that the Bush tax cuts are the cause of our current economic malaise, and that the deficits that we face right now and the national debt is all a result of these terrible tax cuts, most of which went to the wealthy. And there was an article in the Wall Street Journal yesterday in which the author went through literally about an $11.7 trillion swing that we have seen from proposed surpluses in the neighborhood of $5.6 trillion in 2001 to now deficits that are being looked at in the neighborhood of $6.1 trillion. And this author's point was that even if you don't give any dynamic scoring to the tax relief of 2001 and 2003, it still was only 15% of those numbers. There's something else and a lot more going on here. And this author says that what's going on, by the way, I don't agree that tax cuts are static. In other words, I think that they do have a positive impact on the economy. And so it will be a much smaller number than that in terms of their actual impact on deficits. But this author indicated that he thought that he actually gave percentages to the numbers. That the economic and technical revisions that we've seen were 33% of that new deficit. Other new spending, 32% of it. Increase in interest on the debt, 12% of it. And the 2009 stimulus bill all by itself was 6% of it, with other tax cuts amounting to 3% of it. So my question to you is, really, could you comment on these numbers and this analysis and give us your perspective on what really is the cause of this huge swing that we've seen since 2001 from projected surpluses in the $5+ trillion range to now projected deficits over $6 trillion?
So there are several components. Component number one is simply, the original forecasts were wrong. And I spent a lot of my time as CBO director explaining how could we be so badly wrong. And the answer was always that about half of the swing was pure economic and technical changes. So my predecessors implicitly extended the dot-com bubble as far as the eye could see, which was bad forecasting.
But was not caused by the tax cuts.
And then the rest was caused by legislative changes on the tax or spending side, and the minority was on tax. In my time, it broke about 20% tax and 30% spending. Since then, there's been more spending. So those numbers are in the range of the kinds of exercises we did at CBO during my tenure. Now, the other way to look at it going forward is we've known that we're going to end up, if we went on current law, at debt to GDP of 62%. We just thought it would take longer to get there. We were going to go off this unsustainable course no matter what. All that really happened is we spent a decade not fixing the problem, and then with the financial crisis and recession, we ate up our cushion. And so it's here now.
So just to make sure that I am summarizing your testimony accurately, those causes of the swing that you talk about and the incorrect projections, that was not caused by the 2001 and 2003 tax cuts.
No. I mean, they contributed, but were not a majority by any means.
And in terms of our current policy moving forward, would you agree that now is not the time to allow the taxes to spring back to a higher level?
I would agree, both from the short-run perspective, but also from the longer-run notion that we're going to need a tax reform. I believe that tax reform will have to be markedly pro-growth if we're going to meet all our obligations, and that the kinds of things being proposed in letting this sunset are exactly the wrong direction from both of those perspectives.
And if Senator Wyden will allow me one more quick question. Senator Wyden, in fact, earlier mentioned that we do have a President's Commission dealing with these fiscal policies. I happen to be one of the senators appointed to that commission. And the question I have for you is, leaving aside the question of trying to just raise or lower taxes, do you believe that reform of our code could be a helpful exercise for us, or a helpful action for us to take, that would actually generate a stronger and more dynamic economy and a more competitive economy for our country, and thereby obviously increase revenues?
Absolutely. We have a tax code that is just really a disgrace by modern standards and interferes with our ability to succeed as an economy. So tax reform is essential. The level of taxes that will ultimately be raised is going to be determined by the spending side, and we know the difficulties there. So I think one of the things to make very clear is that suppose, for example, from the other house, you drop Congressman Ryan's plan. Even under his plan, spending is at 20% of GDP, and it's hard to get it down to that. If you're going to balance the budget, that means you'd have to raise 20% of GDP, and I would stipulate, I don't think anyone thinks it's a good idea to use this tax system to raise 20% of GDP in taxes. It would interfere badly with the economy.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Crapo.